everybody, this is Cassie O'Quinn, and I will be doing a presentation about building an accessible website for clients today. So I work for Geary Company, which is a 50-plus-year-old advertising agency based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And we have a lot of nonprofit clients in addition to other clients in the casino, restaurant, and entertainment industry. This particular PowerPoint was prepared for a nonprofit website, but it can be applied to anybody. So this is just going to be a basic introductory and how we explain accessibility to a client. So the first question is, what is website accessibility? Accessibility is a way to make sure that your website includes all users so that people with disabilities can access your website's information and services. The reason this is most important, or very important for a lot of websites, but particularly for nonprofits, is that they serve the community. And a lot of people who need these services in the community are maybe older, or they may have accessibility issues and have difficulty accessing information on your website. So overall, accessibility is a best practice, and it is an expectation for public websites today. It includes compatibility with screen readers and other assistive technologies that people may be using to to help them read or gain information from your website. Again, the reason this matters for nonprofits and for almost everybody is that for a nonprofit specifically, it aligns with their mission to serve the community. And a lot of nonprofits serve disabled people who are experiencing poverty or hunger, and an aging population in most cases. So it's likely that many of your visitors in a nonprofit are already facing accessibility challenges, and you might want to make sure they can access your services. So it's important to view accessibility as an opportunity to improve your website's experience for everyone, and not as a burden or something that just has to be done and is really super annoying. And the reason for this is because accessibility actually benefits everybody. And there are some historical examples of this. Closed captions, for example, help people who are deaf. That's why they were developed, but they're also useful in noisy environments for people who are learning new languages, or when watching television without sound. I'm a scuba diver, and I have friends who bring their phones on their scuba dives, and while they are on their safety stops, which are sometimes very long if you have been under for a long time and you have to wait before you can surface, they'll bring their phones and they'll watch a movie using subtitles on their phone. So closed captions are for people who are disabled, but they're used way beyond that, and they're useful for a lot of other reasons. Another example is the clear color contrast that helps users with low vision, and it improves readability in bright sunlight or on dim screens. Alt text is also for assistive technology, but it can also provide context if images don't load because of a slow internet connection, or if you just don't understand the image and you want to hover over it and read what it's supposed to be about. The big bonus with accessibility is that you're designing your website to work nice with robots, and Google is a robot. So the bonus here is that accessibility improvements can also improve your SEO. So there is a balancing act between accessibility and design. A lot of brand colors and fonts have not been developed in with accessibility in mind. And because of this, sometimes there is going to be some design changes that have to be made if, for example, you have like a scripted font as your main font, or if your colors don't meet the standards for contrast. It may be hard for them to read, or it may be hard to read, or it may be difficult to determine cursive text on the internet. So sometimes those kind of situations need to be assessed, and your brand has to be open to designing in a way that is going to remain your brand, but at the same time be accessible. So accessible websites often look cleaner and simpler, and they're not heavily stylized, which is good because in website design now, we are moving away from, Flash and all of these, super complex websites that move and do things. And we're trying to move more towards a simpler website that is just easy to digest. And easier to navigate and faster to read and just better for everyone. I'm sure everybody has been to a website that has just way too much motion and way too much things going on, and it makes it difficult to find the information that you're looking for. So simplifying your website is also making it easier for people to navigate, faster to read, and just overall better for all users who are trying to actually gain information from your website. It can still work with your branding, but you just need to make adjustments for contrast, font weight, and font size, sometimes. So accessibility doesn't mean boring. It means clear, professional, and inclusive. And this is the reason accessibility is important, right? If it's on your website, it is your responsibility. So court cases are increasingly looking at websites as public spaces that everyone has the right to access. And ADA laws do apply to websites, and accessibility lawsuits are currently on the rise against website and business owners who do not take accessibility into account. So the responsibility for accessibility does lie with your organization and not with your developer. So you can't count on your developer to take the heat, and you can't use it as an excuse to say, well, my developer didn't tell me about it, or the person who made my website said it was accessible and I didn't know. So you really need to trust the person or people who you are working with to develop your website. And some of these developers will try to sell you third-party tools that will make your website accessible. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I also wanted to mention that third-party tools such as your donation platform or any kind of embedded form or things that don't actually originate from your website, just services you are using on your website, those have to be accessible too. But that's also your responsibility. So if you're putting a service or a donation platform, for example, on your website, you need to remember that if it's not accessible, that is still your responsibility, even if you did not design that platform and you have no control over the platform. So you really need to research your partners and make sure that they're making an effort to make things accessible as well. So what we use for accessibility is called WCAG, that is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And those are the international standards for website accessibility. And they are recognized by US courts and the European Union. The European Union is very far ahead of us in the US on accessibility. So they will have better websites than we do here in the US for now. But we're catching up. The recommendation is that you follow WCAG 2.1 AA for most websites because this balances accessibility needs with practical needs in terms of cost, basically. So the WCAG levels, A, is just basic accessibility features and covers only the most essential issues, but probably won't solve most problems. AA, which is the standard, it does address most accessibility issues. It is the common best practice standard in the US and the EU, but there may still be some barriers left in AA, even if you're following all the rules. And AAA maximum accessibility is very hard to achieve and very costly to achieve. And so far, most of the websites that are AAA compliant are specifically for people who are deaf or organizations that serve those communities in particular. So AAA is great to strive for, but it's probably not very realistic. So you have a couple different accessibility strategies that you could use, which is first the baseline. Hey, we just want a minimum. We want to pass the automated tests, but automated tests only catch about 30% of accessibility issues. So basically, when you say you just want to pass the test, you just want to meet the minimums, you're saying 30% is good enough for accessibility on my website. More moderate approach, you follow design best practices and do some manual testing, but you may still have some barriers, but this is still better than just passing the test. And then comprehensive is full accessibility with manual audits, legal assessment, and usability testing. So when you're looking at these and thinking about these, it's better to think of accessibility as a journey and not a one-time project, because websites change and evolve over time. You're going to update your website, and then there will be security updates, particularly if you're using a CMS such as WordPress. Any type of update to your website can negatively impact accessibility, and then over time, those negative impacts can build up. So it's important to remember that since your website is always changing, your attention to accessibility has to be changing as well, and you need to be watching it and making sure that after your site is accessible, you are then making sure it remains accessible. So it's an ongoing commitment, and one of the best ways to maintain accessibility is to demonstrate that you are making an effort towards the community that you serve to be accessible. So this includes an accessibility statement on the site footer, a mechanism to provide feedback that users can use, so like usually a form on your site, so that they can report barriers that they might encounter on your site or request accommodations. You should document accessibility adjustments that you've made to provide evidence of good faith compliance. In the event of legal scrutiny, it's always good to have a record. And you should have a particular point person on your staff or within your organization who is the accessibility coordinator, who can oversee all of these efforts that you're making, keep the documentation for you, and ensure consistency over time. And then you should also be regularly testing and updating the site for barriers and listening and responding to your users' feedback. Unfortunately, accessibility cannot be guaranteed because every website's different. And it's subjective. Sometimes when you remove a barrier for one thing, it creates a different barrier. For example, optimizing for screen readers may confuse voice control users. And automated captions meet standards, but they are sometimes confusing depending on if they are written by AI or if they are manual captions, because manual captions are written by a human, so obviously they're going to be clearer and easier to understand, but that doesn't mean you're not meeting the standard with the AI. So it's kind of a balancing act, and people are going to disagree about how accessible something is. And even developers may disagree on the best approach to meet a certain standard or guideline. So again, it's an ongoing process, and then you need to test it constantly and adjust for the changing needs of your population. So here's where I'm going to talk about why overlays are not the solution. So the overlays like Accessibility or UserWay, which a lot of developers will try to sell you. They cost about $50 or $60 a month. They do provide this little guy on your website that people can click, and then they can use it to change the colors and fonts and things like that on your website. However, they don't actually address the issue in most cases. They can actually make accessibility worse for some users, especially the ones who are using assistive technologies of their own. The Accessibility or UserWay widget things are tested and used by people who actually don't have disabilities. Maybe they just are a little hard of sight, so they like to make the fonts bigger, and they don't know how to do that just using their normal equipment. But people who have serious disabilities already have equipment, and sometimes these widgets can interfere with the assistive technologies that they're already using. So accessibility experts all over the world and disabled people all over the world have denounced these tools, and they will not protect you in a lawsuit. They're actually being sued themselves at this time, and it's just better to stay away from. It's better actually to just not do anything than it is to put one of these things on your website, because it can sometimes even make you a target for lawsuits, because attorneys are starting to catch on that these user widgets don't actually make your site accessible. So there's not an easy fix, and real accessibility requires thoughtful design and testing. And there's no way around that. So when evaluating partners, you want to ask them which WCAG level do they aim to achieve, keeping in mind that 2.188 is the standard. Ask them if they perform manual audits or if they rely solely on automated tests, which again, the automated tests catch about 30% of barriers. So if it's an automated test, it probably isn't going to be that accessible. Ask them about third-party integrations and how they address those issues, as far as if your donation platform isn't accessible, what are they going to do? What are their recommendations? Are they going to help you are they going to help you research for other donation platforms that might be accessible, and just kind of feel out what their take is on that. And then another thing you want to ask about is their remediation and maintenance plan, because as I said, accessibility isn't a thing you achieve. It's kind of a work in progress all the time. So anyone promising you accessibility on your website should have some sort of maintenance plan or some sort of ongoing recommendations as far as how you can keep your website accessible after it's been developed. If they're just going to develop it and disappear, it's not going to stay accessible, unfortunately. So key takeaways here is that you should look at accessibility as an opportunity to serve all members of your community better. It's an ongoing commitment, and a fully accessible website requires thoughtful design, manual testing, and organizational responsibility. There's no way around that. Develop clear policies within your organization about communication and help demonstrate to the community through your website that you are committed to making your website accessible for all users. And this is the current site evaluation for the client we did this presentation for. However, it applies to most clients. Your original website is likely not designed or built with accessibility in mind, and there are many challenges that can't be addressed in a cost-efficient way if your website has already been built and it's already in existence. And I mentioned before, several brand colors and fonts in use usually don't meet the accessibility standards, so those will need to be rethought. Your next steps will depend on your budget considerations and the organization's accessibility goals. But the basic idea here is, in general, you will probably have to redesign and redevelop your website if you want it to be accessible. And then once it's redesigned and redeveloped, you'll want an ongoing maintenance and documentation plan and remediation plans to ensure long-term accessibility compliance. Once again, I'm Cassio from Geary Company. We do specialize in accessible websites and accessible design. So if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in our YouTube channel or contact us, and we'll be happy to discuss site accessibility with you in further detail. Thank you for watching this presentation.